Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Apples and Genos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Nate Groot Niblink. I'm the creator of Apples and Genos, originator of the Zero G draft strategy, and contributor to Yahoo Fantasy. In this podcast, I'm going to go over the most puzzling players league wide as submitted by the Apples and Genos Discord server. Let's get it. All right, we are live on YouTube streaming this to the masses, or, the 5 people that are here so far. But it's been great to have some interaction on these and have people join in live. Submit your comments. Let me know who your most puzzling players are. Any questions you have, that's what I'm here to do tonight, along with to tackle these puzzling players as submitted by the Apples and Genos Discord server. If you are not in the Apples and Genos Discord server, that's a problem that you should probably remedy quickly. You definitely can do that. Check out the show description, click the link, and get in there. And we'd be glad to have you. And you can get your puzzling players in for next week as well. All right, I'm going to dive right in. We've got some people already here in the chat. Toronto Dave's in here. Good to see you, buddy. Ciro's in here saying what's up. Glad to see everybody joining the stream here. Let's jump right in with Andrei Svechnikov. Svech, it's tough to say what's exactly been going on. Obviously, coming off a huge injury, not one that you should take lightly. He's got a couple of assists in his last 5 games here, averaging just over 17 minutes. Has been skating on what I guess you would call a second line with Kotkaniemi and Martin Necas. Still solid line mates, although obviously you'd love to have that Aho exposure at even strength. The bigger problem has been that Svechnikov hasn't been on the top power play for a little bit now. Don't really know whether to put a lot of stock into that or not. I feel like Svechnikov should find his way back there. You do see the underlying numbers a little bit confusing to kind of parse here. 164th in shots per 60 over these last 5 games, but 28th in individual Corsi for per 60. So the attempts are there, but he's not hitting the net and not getting to dangerous areas. 187th in individual scoring chances for per 60. On ice numbers, good on the Corsi for side, 38th in Corsi for per 60, but not so great on scoring chances for 153rd there. So a little bit odd, and he hasn't scored a goal actually this season. 9 games, hasn't scored a goal yet. So not exactly what you were hoping to see from Svechnikov. A lot of people drafted Svechnikov thinking that he was going to be back to start the season with no issues. That obviously was not the case, and it seems like it's taking him a little bit of a while here to really take off and get going. I do think that if you get off of Svechnikov right now, I think you're going to regret it. I do think that eventually he'll find his footing. If it was an ACL injury with Svechnikov in the knee, and if you follow football at all, oftentimes this will happen to running backs, and it'll take some time when they first get back. They're not fully confident in their range of motion and everything just yet, and take some time for them to feel 100%. Even if their body is all the way healed, sometimes it takes a little while for the mental side to come back. So I'm not discounting that could be a possibility here with Svechnikov, but really what I want to see is for him to get some Aho exposure, either on the top power play or at even strength. Really, I would prefer the top power play. So I still think that Svechnikov is probably a buy low, but it's pretty hard to feel excited about going to do it when the underlying numbers are not terrific. They're okay, definitely not something that you're super scared of, but just 17 minutes a night. He's not getting tons of minutes. No one in Carolina typically does. So all that to say, I think you just got to kind of hold on to Svechnikov, as distasteful as it may be at the moment. I think if you drop Svechnikov, you're really going to regret it later on in the season. Toronto says #0G. We'll get to some of that in this episode. Don't you worry. Patrick saying, Hiya. Batherson has picked up a little. Definitely interested in what I say about Terry. Terry is definitely coming up. We've had a lot of interest in talking about Troy Terry. We did talk about Troy Terry in relation to Jared McCann, Blake and I yesterday. I'll dive in a little bit deeper here in the episode today just to talk through what I'm seeing from Terry. Ciro says Fetch is slacking. I don't know if he's slacking necessarily. Like the shot attempts are there. That part is good, but definitely needs some better deployment, some more minutes, and needs to probably get some confidence back after coming back from the injury. Ricky saying he did get a goal called back the other night. Still not ideal for sure. Nick is saying Zero G's killing me. I'm not doing myself any favors either. Dropped JoJo right before he went on a 2-game W streak. Yeah, you definitely Zero G is not for the faint of heart. You've got to, know when to hold them and know when to fold them, I guess, a little bit. But definitely, I do think that, I've posted a lot. I've written articles. I've done podcasts. There's a lot of my work out there on the strategy and why I think it is the best strategy for goaltenders in the vast majority of leagues. So I'm not going to dive into much Zero G strategy here right now, but I definitely think that there are going to be more goalies out there. So don't give up. Not even a quarter of the way through the season here. Don't give up. Stay vigilant for sure. That's one of the aspects of doing Zero G is you got to stay vigilant and find those goaltenders who are going to take over and who are going to provide you that value that you need at the goaltender position off the waiver wire. So definitely stick with it. It's early in the season yet. I know it doesn't feel like it if you've got some losses piling up in the early season, but it is still early and things will turn around. There will be more goalies coming up that you'll be able to pick up. All right, I'm going to keep rolling into the next player here, which is John Carlson. 2 assists in his last 5 games, still averaging almost 27 minutes a night. But the underlying numbers have not been good here. He started out hot and then has really cooled off in the last little bit. To be fair to him, Washington as a team has really cooled off in the last little bit as well. But John Carlson just 120th in shots per 60, 96th in individual scoring chances, 4 per 60 amongst all defensemen. Those are usually metrics that he shows out very well in. So that's a little concerning. And then the on-ice numbers, 127th in Corsi, 4 per 60, 154th in scoring chances, 4 per 60. Not what you wanted to see from John Carlson in this stretch here. On the season, pacing for 49 points. Definitely not what you wanted to see. Although Carlson did come at a relative discount to at least my projection for him in your drafts this season. So relative to where you probably drafted him, he's probably not been absolutely terrible, but definitely the last stretch of play here is a little bit concerning. I think that we have to be exhibit a little bit of patience with a guy of John Carlson's caliber. I think that Washington has gone through some ups and downs. They started very cold. They kind of came back up for a little bit of a stretch and now have gone cold again. It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride there, and Carlson has mirrored that effect to some extent. Have to remember too, this is a rookie head coach that they've got there. Definitely going to be some bumps along the way with a rookie head coach, but overall, I do think that in the end, a guy of John Carlson's talent, that's going to win out. It's not like this guy had a bad season last year. He was just injured for a portion of it. Freak injury. Don't expect that, there's any injury concerns moving forward with John Carlson there. Obviously, the Capitals don't have any concerns or they wouldn't be playing him anywhere near 27 minutes a night. So overall, where are you going to find a guy playing power play 1 with Alex Ovechkin who's playing 27 minutes a night? Those guys don't just grow on trees. Yes, the underlying numbers are concerning, but it is a small sample size here still. I'm going to be holding on to John Carlson for at least a couple of weeks beyond this to see where things go from here. If he continues to just not be able to produce in the underlying numbers, then I'll start to get more and more concerned. But this little 5-game stretch here that we're talking about, I'm not too concerned just yet. Would I buy low on John Carlson? Having said that, I think I would, to be honest. I think that Carlson's expectations going into the season were the lowest they have ever been, basically, for this player in the last 5 years. And so I think that maybe this is starting to confirm some priors for some people who If you didn't draft him in your league, then probably the person who did draft them drafted John Carlson fairly late in their league. And so I would be interested in at least kicking tires on John Carlson and seeing what his value is in your league right now. Some more comments we have here. Zero says, I went 0G, got Talbot off the wire and Ingram doing great. Yeah, and that's the power of it, right? If you do hit on the guys, then you'll be doing great. And you just have to keep firing bullets. That's something that I talk about too. You got to keep firing bullets, find these guys who are in good situations. Cam Talbot, prime example, not a guy that anybody was expecting to have a huge year, but he gets into LA. LA's been playing terrific in front of him, and that leads to great fantasy success. Steve is in here asking Dubois versus Laine. Who's winning in the NHL and who's winning in fantasy hockey bangers leagues in that trade? That's an interesting topic. Obviously, Dubois has since moved on from Winnipeg, so it's not even like the Jets really got their full money's worth out of that trade. But in terms of who I would take today, I think Laine is definitely the more dynamic offensive talent. You haven't seen it really so far this year, obviously, but just in general, I think Laine has more offense to give, but I think Dubois probably impacts the game a little bit more when he's at his best. Both definitely kind of mercurial players, guys who seem to be a little bit of a roller coaster ride in their own right, but yeah, it's hard to argue from an NHL perspective with the center who can play at a very high level, at least even in stretches. That's a really, really valuable thing. For fantasy and bangers, probably still leaning Dubois, but yeah, I think Laine does have more upside. So all that to say, it's going to be tough to be in on Laine right now. We did touch on Laine a little bit in the episode yesterday, but obviously getting scratched there, that's a big deal. What does that mean? I honestly think it's going to be the coach who's gone. If anything's going to change in Columbus, they've got to string some wins together here quickly, or else things are going to change there. They're going to be basically forced to make changes. And I honestly think it's the coach who's going to change. If anything does happen, I don't think anybody's taken Laine or Gaudreau or any of those big moves that you might think they could make. Those are huge contracts. I don't see those moving, especially with the way that the early season has gone there. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think there are brighter days ahead for Laine, but it's really tough to be rostering Laine right now. His ice time has been on the decline, as you might expect, given the lack of production. I think he just maybe he needed this game off to get the reset. Maybe, Pascal Vincent is some sort of genius that we don't realize yet. It's hard to argue with how bad the results have been on the ice so far, though. It doesn't seem like there's much of a system in place in Columbus. Elvis Merzlikins playing his heart out every night, but getting absolutely shelled, which is tough to see, especially given the acquisitions this offseason, Provorov, Severson. It seems like they really focused on the back end there and still have been unable to kind of meld it all together into some sort of cohesive defensive strategy or offensive strategy for that matter so far. Kevin says Kaprizov versus Kyle Connor going forward. That's an interesting discussion. Obviously, Connor has been terrific. Tied for the league lead in goals at this point with Austin Matthews, but it's hard to get away from Kirill Kaprizov for me. He is on this list. Kaprizov is, and we will get there eventually, but obviously pretty hard to argue with the 10 points for Connor the last little bit versus the 3 points for Kaprizov. I will say that overall, I think Kaprizov, you look at this, in his last 5 games, Kaprizov ranks first in the league in on-ice scoring chances for per 60. So his points are coming. I have no doubt of that. I think the ceiling is higher for Kaprizov, but would I be shocked if Connor has a better year this year in particular? No, I would not. So it is kind of tough to say exactly where it's all going to shake out to. I will say this 106-point pace for Kyle Connor does look fairly unsustainable. 85% IPP, 20.3% shooting percentage, 12.6% on ice shooting percentage. I think that he regresses back down is probably somewhere in the 85 to 90 point range for the rest of the season as a pace. And I do think Kaprizov can get back up to a 100-point pace. So, Yeah, I don't know if I'm making the trade in one direction or the other at this point. They are probably relatively equivalent in my eyes in most respects. If I had to pick a player to score the most points the rest of the season, I think I would still pick Kaprizov, though. That may be a little bit of a hot take for you, but that's the way I feel. L. Adamson says, I went 0G was 50-50 between Markstrom and Hill. I picked Markstrom FML LOL. Markstrom's actually been trending up the last little bit. Hopefully you hung on to him this long and now you're starting to get some of the good Markstrom. So hopefully that's good. Blake's just jumping in. What are your thoughts on Dallas's new lines? Yeah, it's very interesting. So just came out not that long before I started streaming here. Jason Robertson is now on a line with Wyatt Johnson, Evgeny Dodonov, and Jamie Benn is up on the top line with Hintz and Pavelski. Yeah, I mean, that's a demotion for Robertson. It's pretty hard to cut that any other way. It looks like a demotion. But I think in the end they're probably going to roll that top 9 fairly evenly with how well the Sagan, Duchesne, Marchment line has been playing. Maybe they're just trying to spread things out, get Robertson rolling a little bit more even, and see if they can find some more chemistry in other ways. It's not a bad idea overall. I doubt it'll last, to be honest with you. They've run the Robertson, Hintz, Pavelski line with so much success over the last couple of years that I think it's probably a blip in the radar. We'll look back at it at the end of the season and hardly remember that there were a few games there where Robertson played with Johnston and Dodonov. That's my take there. Turnabry says, any thoughts, hold or drop? Boldy, Norris, Terry, Gostisbehere, Ekblad. That is a list for sure. I'm probably dropping Norris of that group, and I'm definitely holding on to Boldy. I think brighter days are ahead for him for sure. L. Adamson agrees with me there. Michael says, looks like John Hockey has regressed back to Johnny. That's clever, Michael. I'll give you that one. Matt says, do you think it would be worth trading Kaprizov for Robertson 1-for-1? I kind of feel like that again. You're talking about a bunch of left wingers here between Kyle Connor, Kirill Kaprizov, and Jason Robertson that are probably all going to end up in roughly the same spot at the end of the season. I don't think I would trade for Robertson. Robertson just gets the little bit of a ding where he never gets the time on ice that Connor and Kaprizov get. So he has to be very efficient. He has been very efficient last year. Was very efficient. You can see he's got 6 points his last 5 games. It's not like he hasn't been producing here the last little bit, but if I had to make a trade, I would not trade Kaprizov away to get Robertson right now. Zero says, someone in my league traded away Draisaitl to acquire Stamkos. Is that reasonable? I do not think so. I would take Draisaitl 10 times out of 10 there. Kyle says, is Ingram a good rest of season goalie to hold? I would say there are possibly like 1 or 2 goalies that I would consider a good rest of season goalie to hold. The rest are on notice with me at any given time. But I mean, I'm in with Ingram. I picked him up today. He was dropped and I claimed him on waivers, spent some fab to acquire him for this week, and we'll see where it goes from there. He has been playing really well, and you can't take that away from him. It wouldn't shock me if he was, the 0G story of this season, the way that Philip Gustafson was last year or Stuart Skinner was last year. That wouldn't shock me in the slightest. So I'm in on Ingram for the time being, but I'm not comfortable with Ingram by any stretch. Justin asking, where do you think Patrick Kane would fit in best? It's a good question. I would love to see him in Buffalo. He would add some punch to the top 6 there, I think, a way that would probably help them out. Yeah, I think that would be my top spot if I had to pick. I don't think he's going there. I honestly don't know where he's going to end up, but that would be my pick if I could just arbitrarily choose where he ends up. Ian asking, would you trade Svech for Meyer in a categories league? I'm going to assume bangers categories. Honestly, that's probably a wash between Svechnikov and Meyer, just with the hits and everything that they both provide. Meyer, It's tough. Meyer should theoretically have more upside, you would think. He's got 3 goals in his last 3 games here, but obviously injured right now. The latest I saw is that he's not even expected to come back for Wednesday's game. It's a little bit concerning that they already know that he's not going to be good for Wednesday, but hopefully he's back shortly after that. The last little bit, the numbers have been pretty good. 22nd in shots per 60, 5th in individual Corsi 4 per 60, and then 11th in individual scoring chances 4 per 60. So that looks good. He was doing that without the benefit of Jack Hughes or Nico Hischier, so that's also promising. I think Meyer probably has the bigger ceiling overall. But I do love me some Svech too. I think probably you just feel safer with Meyer, honestly, assuming that the injury is not something that lingers. So I might wait a little bit to hear what's going on with Meyer on Wednesday and see if they're expecting him to be back sooner rather than later. Yeah, just don't feel comfortable with Meyer's situation right now, just given that they've already come out here on Monday and said that he won't play Wednesday. Seems like it's a little bit more serious than maybe we were led to believe early on. Ricky says, as someone who has both guys, Svech and Meyer, slight edge to Meyer because he's been scoring, but otherwise it's kind of even. Feel similarly, yeah, I just feel a little bit safer with Meyer at this point, given the early going for Svechnikov. All right, jumping back into it, I do have Matt Boldy on the list here. You can see, like, Matt Boldy is doing everything he can. 62nd in shots per 60, 4th in shot attempts per 60, 1st in individual scoring chances 4 per 60 over his last 5 games, 12th in Corsi 4 per 60, 2nd in scoring chances 4 per 60. The points are coming for Matt Boldy. If anyone out there is willing to sell you their share of Matt Boldy for a song, then I'm absolutely all in on acquiring Matt Boldy right now. Biggest buy low on this list probably is Matt Boldy right now. If someone is looking at him like he's not what they expected, just 1 goal in 10 games so far this year, I am not concerned about Matt Boldy whatsoever. I think he's a stud, and I think he's going to be a point per game player from this point onward. Matt Boldy, point per game player from this point onward, November 20th, 2023. Book it. I'm calling it right now. We talked about Laine, so I'm not going to get back into that one too much, but yeah, I do think that there are better days ahead. It's hard to blame someone for dropping him right now if they're worried about what's going on in Columbus. I'm worried about what's going on in Columbus. But if you can hang on to him, Columbus does have a good schedule coming up, not this week, but the week after. And, we talked about it in the waiver wire show. This is a week where you can kind of hide players because you're probably benching players on the super heavy nights Wednesday and Friday this week anyway. And so Laine sitting on the back end of your roster is probably not hurting you that much this week. So if that's the case for you, hang on to him for this week. Look at it as an investment in your week 8 with that good schedule, and hopefully he takes this week to get himself untracked and you're feeling a lot better about him for that great schedule. Mika Zibanejad is on this list. Just 1 assist his last 5 games. We talked about Mika Zibanejad a fair bit, me and Blake, yesterday, so I'm not going to go into too much depth here. We'll just say that this is a little bit odd and concerning. He's never really had numbers this low. He's gone very, very cold in the underlying stats here, and that is concerning to me. Yeah, I'm still monitoring it. Less considering him a buy low than someone I'm watching. I'd like to see the underlying stats tick up before I consider him a buy low. Probably, Zibanejad is one of these guys who's given us multiple seasons of really, really solid production. And so I'm not that concerned long-term about it, but how long does this go on for? Am I really buying at the lowest point and it's going to take him, another 10 games before he really starts to heat back up? I don't really know. Is he playing with an underlying injury we don't know about? Also possible. So all those things combining, I'm just going to wait and try to see at least a couple games back to back, where he has a 4-shot game followed by a 5-shot game. Then I'm like, okay, Zibanejad is finding his way back and I can be all in again. Until that point, though, I think I'm just a hold on Zibanejad. Definitely not dropping him, definitely not selling low on Zibanejad. If I have him on my roster, I'm riding it out, but also not super interested in acquiring him at this point right now. Troy Terry here. Also a player we talked about yesterday, Blake and I, so go check that out. But just want to delve in a little bit more on Troy Terry. I think that Zegras being out is kind of hurting him usually Troy Terry is a guy who can drive things on his own, and just you're not seeing that in the underlying numbers right now. That's concerning for sure. The ice time has decreased, kind of commensurate with his decrease in production. So that's concerning as well. Overall, it's just bad vibes with Troy Terry right now. I'm trying to hang on to him for sure. Again, it's a week where you can probably hang on to guys who are not performing and give them a few more games to right the ship here. And so that's what I'm trying to do with Troy Terry, because I do believe in the player. He's shown he can be a really efficient player and produce. Anaheim hasn't been great the last couple of years, but Terry has been able to produce. And so I do think that this is a really good player overall, but he is definitely not feeling it right now in the midst of a pretty bad slump. The Ducks kind of need him to get on track because they're starting to trend downwards as a team. Mason McTavish can't do this all on his own every single night, so they need him. I feel like it might take some more mix mashing of the lines. Maybe McTavish, Terry, Killorn could be a line that gets going, or even Vetrano, McTavish, Terry could be a line that gets going for the Ducks. We'll see what they roll out over the next few games here. Overall, yeah, despite the terrible underlying numbers, I am still trying to hang on to Troy Terry just because I believe in the player that much. Joseph Woll was a popular request in the Discord server. I think the Leafs are in a position right now where they're just going to roll out whoever's winning them games, whoever's playing well at the moment. Samsonov has played a little bit better the last few games, and so I think he's bought himself, some more good grace there. Woll has kind of trended in the opposite direction the last little bit. He did pick up the win against the Wild there on Sunday, so that's good news for him. So I think honestly right now, the way that I view this is just an even split between Woll and Samsonov. Definitely think that Sheldon Keefe has shown that he'll go with a hot hand, though. Did that with Samsonov last year when he was outplaying Murray when both were healthy. So I do think that that's definitely a possibility. Basically, I view Joseph Woll as, a little bit like Connor Ingram, to be honest, where, you look at the schedule, you think that it's probably going to be an every other night. You'll get the other goalie. They'll just alternate goalies every other night unless someone really starts to play poorly and someone really starts to play well. And so I'm just going to look ahead at my week and say, okay, based on the schedule, I'm assuming that Joseph Woll is probably going to get 2 games here. Okay, based on the schedule this week and who started the last few games, I'm assuming that Samsonov is the guy who's going to get 2 games this week. Maybe there's weeks where they both get 2 games, most likely if the Leafs are playing 4 games that week. That's kind of how I'm going to view it. I'm going to take a look, see if I think they're going to get 2 games that week. If they are, then I'm definitely interested, because the Toronto net is a great place to be. The Leafs have really cracked down defensively over the last little bit, the Wild game notwithstanding, where they did give up some chances. But overall, I think the Leafs are still providing a pretty solid defensive environment to their goaltenders. And obviously, we know that the Leafs can score. They're going to win some games. So I think that Woll and Samsonov are both really interesting if they do get dropped anywhere in your leagues. And I would be interested in weeks where I think that I'm going to get 2 starts out of either player. Pavel Menchikov has gone a little bit quiet, just 1 assist in his last 5 games now, averaging under 19 minutes. Young player, obviously, here. 28th in shots per 60, 73rd in individual scoring chances, 4 per 60 amongst defensemen through this cold stretch. 49th in Corsi, 4 per 60, 40th in scoring chances, 4 per 60. Did have a nice 4-shot game on Sunday. But definitely the trend is not as good as we might have hoped. So there is that to say for it. And is he going to stay on the top power play? That's always going to be a question for a rookie defenseman. Right now, I'm still interested in holding and rostering Minchikov unless there are really, really good options out on the waiver wire. In most of the leagues that I'm in, the defenseman waiver wire is pretty bare. So it's not really a thing I'm even considering to drop Minchikov for any of the, bottom of the barrel types that are out there on the waiver wire. So right now, I'm pretty much holding Minchikov. He's demonstrated a really high ceiling already in short bursts to start the season, and that's exciting, but it does seem like the Ducks are not really going to let him loose and give him, a full complement of minutes here and get him, north of 20 minutes. That's going to mute his production. Just being on the Ducks is going to mute his production a little bit. So, yeah, it's a situation I'm continuing to monitor. Right now, his underlying stats are good enough that I'm willing to hold him, and as long as he's on the top power play, basically, I think I'm going to be willing to hang on to Minchikov because I do think this is a really talented player with a lot of upside. And, if things go well, you could see him creep up in the ice time and you could see him be a really valuable piece. But, if somebody, goes out and drops Seth Jones, who we're going to talk about here, then, maybe I would make that swap and go get Seth Jones. Ricky's asking, in a 12-team Cats league, who do you hold for the rest of the season between McTavish and Zacha? Eventually, one may have to be dropped when Tage Thompson is healthy. It's an interesting question. McTavish has continued to exceed my expectations, has gone a little bit more quiet the last little bit. Seems like, the team has gone quiet and McTavish has been held down a little bit. Zacha's underlying numbers really bad on the individual side. 318th in shots per 60, 249th in individual scoring chances 4 per 60, but the on-ice number is terrific. 49th in Corsi 4 per 60, 9th in scoring chances 4 per 60. You can get that if you're playing alongside a guy like David Pastrnak for sure. Now, Zacha does have a goal in the game tonight off a sweet feed from Pastrnak, so you're always going to be in that realm with Zacha as long as he's they don't really have anything else. Charlie Coyle is not going to be the guy on the top line. It's going to be Zacha the vast majority of the time. So that's nice. I think that McTavish has more upside, but Zacha feels a little bit safer. It would honestly probably be a little bit of a flavor of the moment kind of situation. I don't think I have a strong take between the two at this very moment. I think McTavish is playing better, but Zacha's in a better situation. And so I think that probably, you average out all the things to the end of the season and they probably end up in about the same place. Roughly 60-point players is how I view both of these guys for the rest of the season at this point. McTavish, is the guy that I think has the most upside, but Zacha, again, has that terrific deployment. So really tough one for sure. Definitely you're thinking on the right track to be wondering what you want to do between those two. Kyle asking, who's the most droppable, Schwartz or Norris? Do Drake Batherson and Sam Bennett have a lot of upside this season? Schwartz is playing the game tonight, and then after that, he's probably not fitting into your lineup for the rest of the week. Josh Norris probably not either with just the one game this week. I'd rather drop Schwartz than Norris. Schwartz has gone pretty cold after being really hot. Just flicked the switch and went to sleep. It seems like did Jaden Schwartz right when I picked him as my streamer of the week in the head-to-head streamer deathmatch against Blake. So thanks for that, buddy, Jaden Schwartz. Maybe that is emotionally clouding my judgment here, but I would prefer to drop Schwartz at this moment. I think Norris has probably a bigger upside in Ottawa. Ottawa is a really good offensive team. Norris seems to be, a guy that they want to have on the top power play when everything's running smoothly. So whether or not that continues to be the case all season long is up for debate, but he has been there pretty much consistently all season long. Been playing with Brady Tkachuk as of late. That's a good spot for him. So all things being equal, I would try to hang on to Norris and I would let Schwartz go there. Between Batherson and Bennett, I think both do have upside for sure. Talked a little bit about Bennett and, this opportunity with Barkov out. He's going to play a bunch of minutes. I don't know. I haven't checked out to see if he's maybe got into any of these goals that Florida's been scoring here tonight. It looks like no, nothing tonight so far, despite 3 goals for Florida. But definitely I think that Bennett has upside for sure, especially if you're in any kind of bangers where he's going to do that. He's definitely a big-time hitter. And Batherson, I think, has really solid upside. Definitely a guy is high on in the offseason based on his underlying numbers and his opportunity this year. So I think both of them do have solid upside. I would give Batherson the edge between the two. All right, let's get back into the list here. Seth Jones, who I mentioned, just 2 assists in his last 5 games, but skating almost 27 minutes a night. He does that. 49th in shots per 60 amongst defensemen through these 5 games, 95th in individual scoring chances, 4 per 60. He plays on Chicago, so the on-ice numbers are bad. 160th in Corsi, 4 per 60, 171st in scoring chances, 4 per 60. On the season, Seth Jones has 0 goals in 16 games with just 7 assists for a 36-point pace. Yeah, I think the underlying numbers here suggest that he probably has a decent bounce back in him. The IPP should be a little bit higher, and definitely he's going to score some goals at some point here. But yeah, it's definitely a terrible situation in Chicago. You can see it holding down the talent that is Connor Bedard at times as well. And so Seth Jones is not going to be a guy who lights it up, absolutely, but I think he's a pretty safe bet for, at least 40 points, probably 45 points, and he's going to give you some banger stats along the way. So I think Seth Jones is probably who you thought he was. He'll probably go on a little bit of a mini heater somewhere, get 4 points in 5 games, and then, he'll be kind of right back to where we thought he was going to be at the start of the season. So I'm not too worried about Seth Jones overall. His role is really secure there. There's no one coming for his minutes. So I think that Seth Jones is exactly who you think he is, probably. Tyler Bertuzzi, definitely a guy that's trended up over the last bit. The underlying numbers here immense. 10th in shots per 60, 24th in individual scoring chances for per 60, 36th in Corsi for per 60, 22nd in scoring chances for per 60. Gets to ride William Nylander's coattails on even strength. 16 minutes plus average time on ice the last 5 games, 5 points in those 5 games. Now just up to 39-point pace on the season, but definitely turning his season around at the moment and benefiting from the hotness that is William Nylander and John Tavares. Don't forget about how well he's been playing in the early season. My thing with Bertuzzi is no matter how well he plays, he's probably never going to be more than this. Like, he's never going to be more than a point per game at any stretch. Even to get to this point, he had to have an 83% IPP. He's not going to be there in most cases throughout the season. Plus a 12% on ice shooting percentage, which is pretty high for a guy who's not on top power play. So all things told, I think Bertuzzi, he's definitely demonstrating some really good numbers here, and maybe that's a higher ceiling than I originally thought for him. Maybe it's a 65-point ceiling for Bertuzzi this season instead of, I thought he was probably going to be more in the 55-point range on the year just because of the role that he's kind of forced into here. Overall, I'm happy to see that Bertuzzi is producing and producing well under the hood as well. But I do think that this is not a player with, elite upside, point per game upside from this point onward. Ciro says, I believe the trade in my league that transpired, Draisaitl for Stamkos, was gross. If you were commish, would you veto that trade? I would not veto that trade. I'm pretty anti-veto unless it's like... pretty much collusion is the only reason that I'm willing to veto a trade where, there's some backhanded deals going on where, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Money's changing hands behind the scenes, things of that nature. If someone's just playing the game poorly and they're undervaluing their star in Leon Draisaitl, that's their prerogative. They get to manage their team. You can't control how other people in your league manage their teams. If you want to get in on that, then you should be talking to all these people in your league who you think are undervaluing their stars, and you should be offering them first. You probably have a player on your roster who's very equivalent to Stamkos in most respects that you could have offered for Draisaitl and gotten that deal done first. But you didn't, and the other person did, so that's better for them. To be quite honest. And so I'm not in favor of vetoes unless there's clear collusion going on. Jordan Kyrou is the next up on the list. 4 points in his last 5 games, averaging just over 18.5 minutes per night in that stretch. 101st in shots per 60, 157th in individual scoring chances for per 60. On ice numbers, 117th in Corsi for per 60 and 82nd in scoring chances for per 60. On the season, just a 48-point pace for Kyrou, which is not ideal for sure. We're expecting more from Kyrou. Definitely a guy who has shown the ability to put up shots in bunches. And you do see like the shot attempts for 60 is still up there at 55th, so he definitely is still exhibiting that ability. And on the season, he's still 33rd in shots per 60, so it's just this last little stretch. On the season, 63% IPP, 6.8% shooting percentage. That's coming up. 8.1% on-ice shooting percentage. That's going to come up. It's fair to wonder by how much in St. Louis. This is not a team with a ton of offensive talent. You have Thomas, you have Buchnevich, you have Kyrou, and then it really falls off after that. All things told, I think that Kyrou definitely... well, I won't say definitely, but probably does not have the ceiling that I envisioned for him this year. But I do think that he's going to have a pretty solid season when all is said and done. So that's my take on Kyrou. I think, maybe a 65-point pace is maybe a little bit more reasonable from this point onward, but still plenty worth rostering and plenty worth holding even when he gets a little bit cool from time and again. Shane Gostisbehere has 3 points, all came in one game in his last 4 games here. Did get benched for a game in there, which is not a great look, but in the games that he did play, averaged 21 minutes, so go figure. 9th in shots per 60, 7th in individual scoring chances, 4 per 60 amongst defensemen in those 4 games, so getting it done when he's been out there. On ice numbers are okay. 56th in Corsi 4 per 60, 44th in scoring chances 4 per 60. On the season, he's on pace for 21 goals and 62 points. That would obviously be pretty strong numbers from a guy like Gostisbehere. 55% IPP, 12.9% shooting percentage, and 11.9% on ice shooting percentage. He's definitely on the top end of all of those metrics, but not by an incredible amount. If he continues to get 21 minutes a night and not closer to a season average, which is just below 20 minutes a night, then definitely I think he's got a ceiling towards 60 points as long as he's on the top power play and skating 21 minutes. I do think he has that ceiling. Gostisbehere is your prototypical offensive defenseman who doesn't play a terrible amount of great defense. So that's always the question with Gostisbehere, and he doesn't provide a lot of peripherals, so he's kind of in that classic, Tyson Barrie, John Klingberg mold, where if he's not scoring points, if he's going cold, then you're like, man, what am I doing with this guy on my roster? And then he scores 3 points the next game. You're like, oh, I love Shane Gostisbehere. So know what you're getting into when you roster these players. If you don't like to roster that kind of player, then trade him when he's hot and get somebody who, is a little bit more consistent game to game and you feel a little bit better about rostering. But overall, I think Gostisbehere is still pretty solid, and I would expect him to be north of 50 points for a pace for the rest of the season. Evan Rodrigues on the list here, 3 assists in his last 5 games, and no points here on the 4 goals now that the Panthers have scored so far. But Rodrigues has definitely cooled off in a big way. 189th in shots per 60, 246th in individual scoring chances 4 per 60. I think that, this is just what Rodrigues does. He goes hot. He takes a lot of shots, always a very low percentage converter, has never entertained a high shooting percentage for any length of time. So Rodrigues is a streamer, plain and simple. Right now playing on a line with Nick Cousins and Kevin Stenlund. Like, you should be dropping Evan Rodrigues. That's not a place where you can go to score fantasy production of any kind. So yeah, I would definitely be dropping Rodrigues. Has been off the top power play for a little bit here. They have a ton of options that are far more talented than Evan Rodrigues in Florida, even with Barkov out. So I'm not anticipating that Rodrigues will trend much better from here on out. Kaprizov, we already talked about. I'm a big proponent of buying on both Kaprizov and Boldy from Minnesota. Better days are coming. The underlying numbers suggest that both of these guys are ready to break out. Kaprizov hasn't been getting the shots, but the shot attempts are still there. He's going to break through, folks. It's going to happen. I'm not worried about Kaprizov or Boldy whatsoever. Go out and grab them if their current managers in your league are panicking whatsoever. We talked about Meyer, so I'll move on to Georgiev. Georgiev is an interesting one. Was hot early on, then kind of cooled down and has just kind of been okay, I guess is the best way to describe it. Yeah, I think that Georgiev is still, he's a guy who's going to see an incredible amount of volume on the season once again for a really good team in Colorado. I still think that he's probably probably a top 5 goaltender for me rest of season. It's an 890 save percentage. That doesn't feel good, but the results as of late have been much better. I say that as they're at the end of the first year against Nashville, so maybe he'll let in 6 goals in the last 2 periods here and make me out to be a liar. But 3 wins in a row before this, allowed 1 goal, 2 goals, 3 goals. I think that Georgiev is fine. The Avalanche have been playing much better the last few games here, been limiting the chances against, which is kind of actually holding down his save percentage in an odd way. So I think that the numbers look worse than the situation is for Georgiev, and I think that he's probably, I think he's still a top 5 goaltender for me rest of season. Dubois is the last player on the list from the Discord server. He has 3 points in his last 5 games here. The average time on ice is a little bit skewed because he did leave a game there. And then came back the next game. But yeah, that game he only played 12 minutes, 33 seconds. That skews the ice time a little bit. But yeah, 14 minutes, 15 minutes, 16 minutes, 17 minutes. It's in that range through the last little stretch of play for Dubois. Underlying numbers are not that great, especially considering that LA's been pretty good. 159th in shots per 60, 146th in individual scoring chances for per 60, and then 128th and 121st in Corsi for per 60 and scoring chances for per 60, respectively. On the season, he's got just a 46-point pace. I didn't have a big projection on Dubois this season because I kind of did think that, the Kings are going to do what the Kings do, and they're going to split the lines, split the ice time pretty evenly throughout that top 9. Once again, they're splitting it even more evenly, I think, than even I thought. But yeah, Dubois, I think, is a good player on a really good team that doesn't need him to play really big minutes and to score a ton of points, and so I don't think he will. I think he's probably like a 55-point player rest of season is where I'd probably put him. Yeah, if that's good for your league, then go ahead and get in on Pierre-Luc Dubois. If that's not what you were hoping for, then maybe you want to trade him if he gets on a little bit of a hot streak the next little bit here. Kyle's asking, speaking of Boldy, who would you target him with? That's an interesting question, one that I'm willing to entertain here just before I close things out. So let me do this. Let me check out the rostered percentage on Yahoo for Boldy and see who else is around there that we might be interested in moving off of. So Boldy himself is rostered in 87% of Yahoo leagues right now. Let me scroll down and see what we can find in the 87% rostered range. So you've got guys like Frank Vatrano is 87% rostered right now. I'd absolutely trade Frank Vatrano for Matt Boldy in a heartbeat if I could do that. Travis Konecny, that's an interesting one. Konecny has scored a bunch of goals, been a little bit unsustainable with those goals, but definitely shooting a lot. That's an interesting one. I think I would take Boldy there rest of season, to be honest with you, but definitely an interesting one. Another player, let's see, Mark Scheifele, 86% rostered. Scheifele's another interesting one. I think I would go Boldy, if only for the left wing, right wing eligibility. Nico Hischier's in this range. Obviously, he's going to come back, definitely taking Boldy there. His teammate Matt Zuccarello is 85% rostered, taking Boldy there. Philip Forsberg is 84% rostered. That's a pretty interesting conversation. I think if you were in a Cats league where Forsberg's elite shots and pretty good hits really move the needle for you, then you're taking Forsberg. If you're in a sheer points league, might lean back to Boldy, to be honest. Yeah. So there's a few names that you could potentially target Boldy with. If you can package a couple of people even lower than that to go up and get Boldy, if you can package some guys who've just gotten hot and gotten rostered in a few spots, like if you can package, I don't know, Jamie Benn and Martin Necas, if you can package those two guys to go get Matt Boldy, absolutely. In a heartbeat, I'm doing that move. So a few ideas for you out there. Toss those around, apply that to your roster however you can. But those are some ideas for how you might be able to get Boldy on your squad. All right. Well, if you made it this far, if you could leave a like and leave a subscription. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscriptions on YouTube this season. We're over halfway there, which is pretty awesome. Definitely, there's been more and more people hanging out. We've seen, over 20 people throughout the stream here tonight, which is awesome. Love to see the interaction and love to answer questions for you guys live here. So definitely leave us a like and subscribe. That really does help us out, get us in front of more people to get even more subscriptions moving forward. So if you've enjoyed this content, that's the best way to give back. And definitely check out the Apples and Genos Discord server so you can get in your puzzling players for next week. I'll be doing this again every Monday, 8 p.m. I'll be going live here talking about puzzling players. So get into the Discord server. Watch for me pinging everybody to drop their puzzling players for this episode each week and get those puzzling players in. That's going to be it for this episode. Hopefully, it brought you some value, helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. All the advanced stats you heard today came from Natural Stat Trick, which is a terrific free resource. Many thanks to the band They're There for supplying the music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. And that's it, folks. Much love.